Sudo is one of those programs that basically every Linux user has installed on their system, but nobody really thinks about it. So today I'm going to show you an article called What You Probably Didn't Know About Sudo, and I'm also going to show you my Sudo configuration. So if you're new to this channel, remember to subscribe and ding the little bell icon down below because it'll really help the channel out. I'm aiming for 1,000 subs and any help would be really appreciated. So now that's out of the way, let's get started. Good morning everyone and welcome back to the channel. So this isn't the first video that you guys are going to see, but this is the first video that I'm recording after my Christmas break, and it is really nice to be back. So I am absolutely loving that I'm back to making videos. But anyway, so this article is from a website called Aster Cloud. It is titled What You Probably Didn't Know About Sudo. This is a terrible background for this title. Admin, what are you doing? Or whoever is in control of deciding this picture, it's a bad picture. Just pick a new picture. Anyway, that's not too important to the actual article, so let's get into that. So everybody knows Sudo, right? This tool is installed by default on most Linux systems and is available for most BSD and commercial Unix variants. You actually can start up an Arch system without installing Sudo, but I believe it comes with like base or base devel. I didn't bother checking, but it's with one of those packages or one of those package groups that you're probably going to install, so you probably have Sudo. But say if you were to do like Linux from scratch, you don't have to install Sudo if you don't want to. If you want to have to be the root user to do any like root activities, like installing programs or anything like that, you're free to do that, but I would recommend having Sudo, and pretty much everyone else will. So still, after talking to hundreds of Sudo users, the most common answer I received was that Sudo is a tool to complicate life. I don't know, maybe someone thinks that, but I think it's nice to not have to be a root user to do everything. Windows is really annoying with that, where you have to, if you open up a terminal without being the root user, or the admin in that case, you then have to open up another terminal with admin privileges. A mate of mine, Tamor, did do a video on Sudo for Windows, which does get around that, but by default, it's annoying that you can't do that on Windows. There is a root user and there is the su command, so why have yet another tool? I didn't even know about the su command. I probably should have. Anyway, for many, sudo was just a prefix for administrative commands. Only a handful mentioned that when you have multiple administrators for the same system, you can use sudo logs to see who did what. Okay, I've never done any system administration, but I guess that's a important use for it, isn't it? So what is sudo? According to the sudo website, sudo allows a system administrator to delegate authority by giving certain users the ability to run some commands as root user or another user while providing an audit trail of the commands and their arguments. That's the most businessy explanation of a root user or a command to run as a root user that I have ever seen. So by default, sudo comes with a simple configuration, a single rule allowing a user or a group of users to do practically anything. More on the configuration file later on this article. I'll be showing mine as well. I am using a slightly different command than this, because I don't want to have to put my password in all the time, but I'll explain that when I get to it. So in this example, the first parameter defines the members of the group, so in this case we have the wheel group. The second parameter defines the host or hosts the group members can run commands on, so in this case it's all. The third parameter defines the usernames under which the command can be executed. This is also all. And the last parameter defines the applications that can be run. And in this case, it is also all. So with this, you can say, I want the wheel group to be able to run commands on all users under all usernames and only be able to run, I don't know, like shutdown and reboot, for example. And that's an example that I'll show you a bit later on how that's actually structured. So in this example that's right here, though, the members of the wheel group can run all applications as all users on all hosts. Even this really permissive rule is useful because it results in logs of who did what on your machine. Most people aren't really going to care about system administration, but if in the case of whatever reason someone gets access to your computer, then it is nice to be able to have that audit trail. Obviously, if they know what they're doing, they're going to delete the audit trail, but just for someone, I don't know, say you leave your laptop somewhere and they happen to be a Linux user or something and they start messing around with your computer, then you can actually get a log of everything they did, and from that you can hopefully recover. Hopefully, if they do find your laptop and do that, it's just your friend playing around with you and not doing anything too dangerous, but hey, maybe they actually do want to really hurt your system. So next up we have aliases. So of course once it is not just you and your best friend administrating a shared box, you'll start to fine tune permissions. You can replace the items in the above configuration with lists. A list of users, a list of commands, and so on. As I mentioned, you can put in a list of commands that you want to run, like shutdown, reboot, I don't know, pacman, syu, and other things like that. Most likely, you will copy and paste some of these lists around in your configuration. This situation is where aliases can come in handy. Maintaining the same list in multiple places is error-prone. You can define an alias once, and then you can use it many times. Therefore, when you lose trust in one of your administrators, you can remove them from one of your aliases, and you are done. With multiple lists instead of aliases, it is easy to forget to remove the user from one of the lists with elevated privileges. So once again, that's more of a general system administration thing. So if you're running a, say, Linux server or something like that, you might have multiple administrators running it. But let's say one of your administrators leaves the team, then you probably want to remove their admin privileges in case they can do something like SSH into the machine. You don't want them to then be able to actually do anything damaging to the system. So next up we have enable features for a certain group of users. So the sudo command comes with a huge set of defaults. Still, there are situations when you want to override some of these. This is when you use the default statement in the configuration. Usually these defaults are enforced on every user, but you can narrow down the setting to a subset of users based on host, username, and so on. Here is an example that my generation of sysadmins loves to hear about insults. These are just some funny messages for when someone mistypes a password. Oh, I didn't realize you could do that. That's actually really cool. You can... This is why I love the just tech sort of sphere. So if someone puts in the incorrect password, you can actually define an insult to send to them. Why? There's no reason for it to be there. It's just funny to have there. Because not everyone is a fan of sysadmin humor, these insults are disabled by default. The following example shows you how to enable this setting only for your seasoned sysadmins who are members of the wheel group. So if you put in this command into your sudoers file, which I'll show you in a bit, then you can enable insults. That's just cool. I like that. So what do we have here? So if you put the password in wrong, hold it up to the light, not a brain inside. That's a terrible joke. My pet ferret can type better than you. I do not have enough fingers to count how many people thank me for bringing these messages back. That's just, I don't know. There's just something about just the tech sort of sphere where people will just put just random dumb things in their code. There's no productive use for it, but it's just fun to see it there. I don't know, there's just something about that I really, really like. So next up we have digest verification. I'm not really sure what this is, but I will read it out and hopefully someone gets something from it. There are of course more serious features in sudo as well. One of them is digest verification. You can include the digest of applications in your configuration. So in this case, sudo checks and compares the digest of the application to the one stored in the configuration before running the application. If they do not match, sudo refuses to run the application. Oh, it's a hash check. Okay, so you can tell sudo to actually hash check some applications. That's actually really useful in case you have some sort of, let's say you download a program and it replaces ls and it's actually some sort of malware. So you could use this to check that ls hasn't been replaced, or just various other things like that. While it is difficult to maintain this information in your configuration, there are no automated tools for this process. These digests can provide you with an additional layer of protection. So if you're running a Linux server where you don't change stuff very often, then that's probably very, very useful. But for a desktop system, it's probably less useful. So we also have session recording. So session recording is a lesser known feature of sudo. After my demo, many people leave my talk with plans to implement it on their infrastructure. Why? Because with session recording, you can see not just the command name, but everything that happened in the terminal. You can see what your admins are doing even if they have shell access, and logs only show that bash is started. So there are actually other programs to do this, where you can actually record your shell sessions, so not the command, but also the output and other things like that. But I didn't realize that sudo actually had this built into it. That's actually really cool. There is one limitation. Currently, records are stored locally, so with enough permissions, users can delete their traces. Stay tuned for upcoming features. Yeah, that's one of the problems with the audit trail as well. So, because it's stored on your system, if someone knows what they're doing, they can just delete the audit trail. But I guess for the less seasoned hacker, then, or just someone messing around in your system, then it's still useful to be able to keep track of a session or keep track of an audit trail just so you know kind of what they're doing. But obviously, if someone knows what they're doing, then they can just either delete it or just modify it to suit their needs. So we also have plugins. So I didn't realize that Sudo had plugins. That's really cool. So starting with version 1.8, I don't know what the current version is. Sudo changed to a modular plugin-based architecture with most features implemented as plugins. So you can easily replace or extend the functionality of Sudo by writing your own. There are both open source and commercial plugins available for Sudo. So in my talk, I demonstrated the Sudo pair plugin, which is available on GitHub. I don't know what that does. Let's have a look-see. So, plugin for Sudo that requires another human to approve and monitor privileged Sudo sessions. Oh, that's actually cool. So, if you have some sort of system that you really want to maintain security on, then it'll require you to have 2 system admin passwords. That's actually really useful. Not for desktop systems at all, but for highly security specific applications or highly security vulnerable applications, that is something that is really useful. So this plugin is developed in Rust, meaning that it's not easy to compile. I wouldn't say that Rust isn't easy to compile, but sure. And it is even more difficult to distribute the results. On the other hand, the plugin provides interesting functionality requiring a second admin to approve or deny running commands with sudo. Not just that, but sessions can be followed on screen and terminated if there is suspicious activity. So this is just talking about the demo that he did. So what else do we have in here? Okay, there's a couple more things. So logs were already mentioned, so I'm not going to go over that one, but alerts. So email alerts are kind of old-fashioned now, but if you use syslog-ng for collecting your log messages, your sudo log messages are automatically parsed. You can easily create custom alerts and send those to a wide variety of destinations, including Slack, Telegram, Splunk, or Elasticsearch. So this right here is just talking about the configuration file. I'm not going to jump into this, but there is one thing in here I do want to mention. So there's this program, which I didn't know existed, or it's less of a, it's kind of a program. It's more like an alias, but it's called vi sudo. So if you go I need to do sudo vi sudo, which is a confusing command. Then you run that. That'll open up your sudoers file. This will do some like syntax checking and stuff when you're modifying your sudoers file, but it doesn't really matter. If you want to use that, you can, but I typically just modify it by just going straight to the file. So sudo vim /etc/sudoers. So the sudoers file is where you define all of your sudo configurations. So I'll jump into that in just a sec, but if you do want to use that vi sudo program and you don't want to use vi or vim, then you can redefine your editor variable in like your bash profile or your profile or your z profile, wherever you define your specific editor environment variable. I've got mine defined to nvim right now, so that wasn't opening up vi, but if you don't have anything defined in there, it will open up vi. So there's one last thing I wanted to mention here before I jump into my specific configuration file. So while vi sudo checks the syntax, it is easy to create a syntactically correct configuration that locks you out of your system. So by that it means, if you were to do something like, say, not define that members of the wheel group can run sudo, what will happen is that you won't actually be able to edit the sudoers file as your user. You'll have to relog in as the root user to actually edit that. So make sure you don't do anything that will stop your current user from being able to actually edit the sudoers file or use any sudo commands like that, because otherwise you're going to have to log in as the root user and then fix it. It's not a big deal, it's just a little bit of a hassle to get fixed. So yeah, that's nothing else too special in there. Let's jump into my sudoers file. So I'll kill my compositor just so it's a bit easier to read. Okay, so we have a couple of things in here. So this is the command that was being shown in the actual article. So wheel all equals brackets all. So if we look at this, it says uncomment to allow members of the wheel group to execute any command. Now I don't use that one, I use a slightly different version. So this is the same as this, but what this does is it will not require me to put my password in when I run a sudo command. Obviously, this is vastly less secure, but I'm not as worried about it because I'm just on a desktop system. It's not like I'm doing anything that's really security vulnerable or anything like that. And I'm already logged into my system, so I don't know, it's less of a hassle to do it like this. But if you're really worried about security, I would not recommend using this. But for me, I kind of just like the convenience. Actually, we'll leave that uncommented. So, as I mentioned, there's this other version of it. So, wheel all equals all, no password, but defining no password only for certain programs. So, obviously, you would want to have more than just shutdown and reboot. You'd probably also want to have, like, Pacman SYU so you can update your system, or other things like that, maybe Pacman RCNS so you can remove applications and delete the dependencies, and other things like that. There's going to be applications where it's not going to be completely destructive to your system to let people run them without being the root user. Maybe for something like that you do, but for updating and installing, maybe it's fine to not have to put in your password. But this is going to depend on how you like to run your system. So this is kind of a middle ground between these two, where this is the most strict. Actually, the most strict would be forcing only root users to be able to run root commands, but if we're talking about sudo, this is the most strict version, this is the least strict, and this is kind of in between. And this other thing down here, so default !TTY underscore tickets. So this will basically keep you from needing to reinsert your password when you enter your password and then open up a new terminal. Obviously, I don't need this because I have got this command in here. But if I was to use one of these other two, and I'd entered my sudo password for something else, then I wouldn't need to re-enter it for another terminal. And that's another thing that's kind of nice to have. So there's a bunch of other defaults in here that are just commented out. You can have a read through this, and it shows you kind of how to structure your commands. So if you want to have some really complicated sysadmin setup, go right ahead. Personally, for a desktop system, I don't think it's really worth it, but if you're running a server, then it probably makes sense to do something a bit more complicated than I'm doing. So let's see. We have configuration management. So once you have to maintain the sudoers file on multiple machines, you'll most likely want to manage your configuration centrally. So this is kind of just talking about different ways you can maintain your sudoers file. I've already talked about how I like to maintain my config files. I like using Git for it, but there's many different ways you can do it. There's a program where you can actually deploy all your stuff with a symlink farm, and I've been meaning to do a video on that. I just haven't gotten around to configuring it yet, so I'm not going to read through this. I'll leave the link to this article down below, so if you want to actually read through this for yourself, then go right ahead. So this is just talking about some new features. Okay, so there's a new version of sudo right around the corner, version 1.9. So this was released on the 17th of December. So I don't know if it's come out yet or not. So a recording service to collect session recordings centrally, which offers many advantages compared to local storage. So it is more convenient to search in one place. Recordings are available even if the sender machine is down. And recording sessions cannot be deleted by someone who wants to delete their track. So I guess that would be a way to store them online or something like that. Once again, you could probably do that through other methods like using Nextcloud or other cloud storage solutions, even if you don't want to use that. So, hey, whatever you want to do. The audit plugin does not add new users to sudoers, but instead provides an API for plugins to easily access any kind of sudo logs. This plugin enables creating custom logs from sudo events using plugins. The approval plugin enables session approvals without using third-party plugins. And my favorite, Python support for plugins, which enables you to easily extend sudo using Python code instead of coding natively in C. Oh, you had to write them in C? Okay, that's a bit of a pain. See, I don't like Python that much, but when it comes to writing plugins, then I think that's probably where it shines best, where you want to do something just really simple and you don't really need it to be super quick. That's where Python makes sense. I don't really understand writing plugins in C. That seems a bit overkill to me. So I'm not going to bother reading the conclusion because it's going to be basically what I say in my own conclusion. So I hope you got something out of this video, and for me, I didn't realize that there was a plugin system for sudo. I kind of briefly read over this article, but I didn't have a proper read through it. And the other thing that I wasn't expecting was that those plugins were written in C. I don't know why you would bother writing plugins in C. The only other thing where I can think of a program that does that is with the Suckless suite of software. And it's not a good idea there. It's probably not a good idea with sudo. So the Python support will be a nice addition. Even though I'm probably not going to look into writing plugins or running any plugins for Sudo, it's nice to have there. And the other thing that I absolutely loved was the insults. We just need more of that within the tech sphere. I don't really have anything else to say besides that. I just like the idea that your system's going to insult you if you put the wrong password in. That's just fun, and I don't know, I just like that. So I think that's pretty much everything for this video. So if you like this video, remember to smash that like button and leave me a comment down below letting me know what you think. Hopefully I'm not too rusty after taking like an entire week off recording. I feel like I'm not doing as good as I was doing before, but I guess that'll be up to you guys to decide. Down below, I've got my Discord, so go check that out if you want to chat with me. I've also got my library, so if you want to see my videos on a platform that isn't YouTube, go check that out. My library is growing really quickly right now, so that is absolutely awesome. Up on that corner, I've got the playlist this video's in, so go check that out if you want to see other videos like this. Also down below, I've got my support links, so if you want to donate some cryptocurrency or you want to donate on my Patreon or my PayPal, go check those out. Obviously, you don't have to because all my videos will remain available for free. Also, my Twitter and my Mastodon are down below, so if you want to get video updates, that's probably the best place to go for them. And I think that's pretty much everything for this video now, so I'm out.